until further notice after a player, whose sources told our Adrian Wojnarowski is Rudy Gobert, tested positive for the coronavirus. The news broke just before tip-off last night of a game between the Jazz and the Thunder in Oklahoma City. That game was postponed. Gobert was not in the arena. Players were sent back to the locker rooms. Fans were told to leave the arena. And as you know, the league has subsequently suspended all games temporarily. We'll bring in Ramona Shelburne, who does a wonderful job covering the league for us live from Los Angeles. Ramona, what has been the reaction you've heard from the people you've spoken to last night and this morning?
Well, last night I was actually on the phone with some Lakers officials as this was unfolding, because at the point we were talking, people were just trying to get a handle on what was said at the Board of Governors meeting, if they were going to play games without fans. That was the sense that everybody had after that call yesterday with all the owners in the league. People were waiting to see what President Trump had to say. That was at 6 p.m. local. But right as that was unfolding, the situation with Rudy Gobert started coming across the wires. They started getting text messages. I started getting text messages. It almost seemed like a joke, to be honest, at first, because there was that video of Gobert licking the microphones, or that the story that had come around on the wires that Rudy made kind of a joke about it a few days ago. I thought people were kidding when we were first hearing that it was Rudy Gobert that had tested positive, and it slowly dawned on everybody that no, this was not a joke. And very quickly, the person I was speaking to started doing the math. Well, when did they play the Utah Jazz? What teams have the Jazz played in the last 2 weeks? How far back? What is the degree of separation? And even though there was not a direct connection to the Lakers at that moment, there was a connection to a team they had played. And so at that moment, we all got off the phone and said, okay, we need to go to work, because this situation has dramatically shifted, and it's about health and safety now. And they had to go notify their team, their employees, their players, and start putting into place the next steps.
Yeah, that really did change everything. If you just heard Mark Cuban on our show said that he told his players after the conference call, he thought there was a 5 to 10% chance that games would get suspended. And then, of course, everything changes. So what, and I know that we're in uncharted territory. What are you hearing about what the league's plans may be going forward from here?
Well, it didn't hit you like right in the gut when you saw the release come through from the league that they have suspended the season. I think all of us were just hit in the gut, hit in the heart, hit everywhere. And there was an important part to that release, though, which is essentially the games have been suspended indefinitely, which means that there's no talk of rescheduling the season. There's no talk of when are we going to play again. But that doesn't mean the rest of the season is necessarily canceled. It just means there's no talk of what's going forward next, because quite frankly, everybody needs to worry about health and safety of their employees, of fans, of everyone in the league right now. But the next steps will start to be addressed on a conference call with the Board of Governors that's going to take place 9:30 this morning here in Los Angeles, 12:30 on the East Coast. That's when the league is going to deliver whatever they have come up with in terms of conversations with public health officials of what teams should do next. So if you're a team, you have to say, what do we do with our employees? Do we keep them at home? What do we do with our players? Do we allow them to come into the facilities? These are the kinds of questions that everyone is asking right now.
Ramona, we will stay close to you. Thank you very much for the latest from there in Los Angeles. We'll bring it back here, and Stephen A. Smith is with us. First Take is 7.5 minutes away. And Stephen A., we discussed briefly on First Take yesterday, you and I, the possibility that it would come to this. What is your reaction this morning?
It's not surprising. It's relatively predictable when you consider the momentum that was, really swelling over the last couple of days or so. And you knew, based on the meetings yesterday when Wendy and I were talking about it, and Jay and I were talking about it off the air and what have you, you knew that the second the commissioner was on the phone with the owners and owners were contemplating not playing games in front of fans or potentially canceling games, you knew the second one single player tested positive, this was going to go down. And so I have no problem with the NBA's decision. I agree with Jay how they could have acted more expeditiously to some degree, but ultimately they've done a good job. I think they made the right decision in suspending the season. It's the right thing to do. And I got to be honest with you. I think I heard Charles Barkley say that everybody needs to be tested before the games are to resume. I mean, every single player, every single coach, every single individual associated with the games need to be tested before you allow play to resume. That's just my opinion on it.
Even media members.
Yes.
Yes, I would say this too. What do you think about college basketball? So you have the NCAA tournament. We talk about testing, right? But how do you have access to testing? And that's a question for all these young men and women out there who are competing for their universities.
I think in some respects, today would be the day. You don't want to really go off on anybody, but I can't even put into words the level of restraint I'm exercising by not going off on the NCAA. So you got individual schools that are canceling events or what have you, but the NCAA wants to continue to go ahead and what is it? Games are taking place
He's not
today.
going to make it. He's going to go off.
Well, there are ACs.
What are you thinking about? What do you think about? How many times have we accused them of exploiting young athletes? How many times have we accused them of getting over? How many examples have we pointed out, not just for days, months, years, decades, where we look at the exploitive tendencies of the NCAA, and here you are, the day after paid multimillionaires have been banned from playing basketball and being in congested environments, and they're getting paid. You got kids out here that ain't getting a damn dime. But you're going to put them out there and tell them to go ahead and play.
Their schools are closed. The schools aren't having classes.
That's right.
But
Yes.
Doesn't make any sense.
The term that many are using is called distance learning. So my daughter is a college student. I know this. She's coming home. She will not be in school for at least 3 weeks after her spring break ends. And many other colleges and universities across the country, including many who are participating in these NCAA tournament, are doing exactly that.
You can't have distance learning and hand-to-hand combat when you're competing.
Right. There is no distance basketball.
Yes, exactly.
So they make, and we've always talked about how the NCAA uses March Madness. They really make their money off of March Madness when it comes to college basketball. So clearly that's what this is about. You almost come across like you don't give a damn what happens to the student athlete. I'm not saying they feel that way. I'm talking about, optics. This is how it looks. It is disgraceful. And I'm just going to be, that's the nicest I'm going to be about them.
Charles Barkley was on the show earlier, and he agrees with exactly what you just said. Did you hear what he had to say?
I didn't hear everything he had to say.
He was basically saying, and Greeny, you can encapsulate this as well, but he was basically saying that they should go ahead and cancel it and that, CBS should give all the money back to the NCAA.
I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't go with the word cancellation. I would say suspend. Postpone.
Yep.
Do that because you never know. They get in a couple of weeks or so, this could be a significantly better situation. So I wouldn't be as drastic as what Charles Barkley said in terms of just canceling it, get rid of it, because you know what? May Madness would be just as interesting as March Madness.
Were you offset trademarking that name, right?
No. Would you say that? You say that?
I called my lawyer, but he's self-conscious.
I have to let Stephen A. go. I will meet you across the hall in 3.5 minutes for First Take, which starts here every single morning after us on ESPN. And just very quickly to illustrate a point that Stephen A. just made. I mean, we were just told by Matt Barnes that 4 days ago, he was at a birthday party with a bunch of NBA players and no one was talking about this. So that's how quickly things can change.
Yes, and to show the impact of Rudy Gobert's positive COVID-19 test, the Jazz have played 6 games in March, all in different cities: Cleveland, New York, Boston, Detroit, Salt Lake City, and Oklahoma City. And if you factor in the teams they played and then the subsequent teams they played, all 30 teams have come in contact with someone who played with or against Rudy Gobert. So under the direction, this is the Washington Wizards statement, under the direction of the team and MedStar medical staff, the Washington Wizards have advised players, coaches, and basketball operations personnel to self-quarantine for the next 3 to 4 days. The decision was made with an abundance of caution due to the team's recent game schedule. We just talked about it, which saw them play at Utah on February 29th and against New York. Wendy, you have continued to say that you might think that the entire NBA would self-quarantine at this point.
Yeah, I mean, last night, the teams that had recently played the Jazz immediately got messages. Their players were getting messages, self-quarantine effective now. But obviously, everybody started looking at the schedule and doing the math, and also looking at the officials. The officials ended up playing a role. One of the officials in the Sacramento game had just refereed a Utah Jazz game. And the Wizards, I just find this interesting. They were behind yesterday, defying the D.C. mayor's order and saying, we're still going to play. Now they're trying to get out in front. And you know what? I'm going to give them credit for now getting out in front. And I encourage everybody else who is behind, there is still time to get out in front. Let's do it.
Speaking of getting out in front, I jumped the gun on what I was mentioning there, but now that I do have Matt, I should mention it here. Just as an illustration of how quickly things are changing and evolving in this. Last night, the NBA suspended its season. 4 days ago, Matt Barnes, you were telling us that you were at a party for Draymond Green's birthday with any number of NBA players there, and no one was talking about it.
Not a word of it. Not a word of it. It just shows how fast the tide changed. Like we've all been mentioning, once one player got it, we knew it was going to be a domino effect. So, got to be careful.
But once again, I think that speaks volumes about where we are, though. It takes something like Rudy Gobert or like Tom Hanks to get it for it to become this thing that all of a sudden now we're all very cautious about. So, look, my thing is, like, we all should self-quarantine ourselves to some degree, right? I don't know if you guys have this feeling. I do as a human being. Like, it makes me anxious. It makes me anxious with who I'm around, who you've been around, close proximity, social distancing. People don't have that ability sometimes.
Yeah.
It just makes you look at everything drastically different.
I think the only positive thing coming out of it is now that celebrities are infected, that we're going to be able to document their steps through the process of recovery and seeing how important and what necessary steps need to be taken to make sure everyone stays safe.
And quickly, I'm being told in my ear, literally as we speak, the NHL is advising its teams not to hold practices or meetings today. That's the latest from there. Of course, we're waiting to see how the NHL will further react to this. In golf, the Players' Championship is being played as we speak. Our understanding is the ACC